That is one interesting thing that kind of popped up with the liner mine. I wonder if something like Pyro being introduced incentivized people to be a little bit more PvP minded.
You could be so
like
right about that.
They view people now as a threat rather than, hey, there's a person here. Like, this is amazing.
Right. It's not, there's no, like, we're not seeing the conga lines of old, right? Well, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it is for you. Welcome back to the Filp and Burn Podcast. This is episode 4. Before we start, usually we'll do like a little banter or something like this, but really I wanted to start by giving like a heartfelt thank you for all the support that we got on the last video. I'm looking at it now and we have over 800 views on episode 3, which is way more than I was expecting. I was thinking like if I could talk to 20 people, I'll be happy. So thank you guys for tuning in and listening to our little Expedition Soul community. We really appreciate it. Today on the episode, I have Core, who is the founder of Expedition Soul. Hey, say hi, Core.
Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Well,
nice to be here.
I'm glad to have you. I know you wanted to be on an episode for a while, so I'm glad we were finally able to get this thing happening here. With all of our first guests, I always like to start off with the question, what got you into Star Citizen? What are you doing lately? And have you really been interacting with the game? Those kinds of things are kind of where we want to start here.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I can't. It's been a while for me. So I think my brother, he was one of the original backers back in, I want to say as early as 2013. So I had a knowledge of it for a couple years. And I mean, this is back when I was in college. And so at some point when I finally was able to afford a laptop and actually play games, I remembered Star Citizen, and I'm way into science fiction, that kind of thing. I love space simulators. And I looked it up, saw that you could get in for $45, and I was like, great. I mean, I love space games. And I mean, at the time when I was looking, the only thing they had was Port Olisar. That was it. Yeah. That myth and legend that people talk about sometimes, right?
Rest in peace, Port Olisar. Nobody will remember. We'll be all old and crotchety when this game comes out with like 7 kids who are, in their late 20s, and we'll be like, well, I remember Port Olisar. What's this sheriff station thing, you guys? Back in the day, we didn't even have medical beds in this thing,
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah. And so I bought the game and I started playing it on my laptop.
Yeah.
And you know what happened? I couldn't get more than 15, 20 FPS playing the game. So it was something fun. And I was like, wow, I really look forward to this. And I was watching YouTube videos all the time. So it probably wasn't until, I want to say 2018. So this is 3 years after I got the game, 2018, 2019, that I got a computer. I was pretty much done with college at that point, and I could actually afford a computer, and I didn't need to travel around all the time. So I started playing the game a little bit, and I was in the same group with Jumps, O'Neill, and all these other guys that played Arma.
Yeah.
And at some point, the conversation had come up that, hey, like, Star Citizen's getting pretty big, and there's like some cool stuff in the game. Because around the time, I think they had just finished Hurston, and they were about to release Artcore. So there was actually places to go in the game. Well, right.
It's that I think there's so many people, like a surprising number of people who, myself included, kind of came onto the project or turned their eyes back towards the project when we saw that Hurston train travel, right? Like looking at this huge cityscape that you're just rolling by and you're like, wait, so this is a playable game, like with this much depth and lore and this scale, like that really contributed. So I think there was a big outpouring at that time, right? ArcCorp and Hurston in these moments was like, this thing's actually starting to happen,
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, I remember when Art Core was released, and it was kind of, I would say it was kind of mixed feelings because it was like, whoa, this is a planet made out of buildings. Like this is
Yeah.
a city planet. This is Coruscant. And you get there and you can go to these skyscrapers and see all these buildings, but then you realize you can't land anywhere on the planet. So it's kind of like, well, it makes sense why it released so quickly after Hurston, but it's still cool. Like it's cool to see this kind of diversity in just one solar system.
And it's way more than the original plan, which was that we weren't even going to be able to land anywhere, right? It's going to be a very very in the vein of Freelancer, like a spaceship based game where, you know, maybe you're stopping at a station, but like fully developed planets and planet tech and landing wasn't even considered. So, I mean, we're looking at something that is kind of a legacy of the project, which is now it's like they do a lot to make sure we can land everywhere. But, you know, back in the day, it was sort of like a lot of these cities had huge restriction zones, right? Like the number of times you would crash into like a building or something because you just didn't go the exact right way. It was, I mean, it's changed from that, but it was sort of like, it's fun to see how that was an evolution from where the game idea came from to the, you know, some might call feature creep that happened to what we're seeing now, what we can do now. You know, it's a big change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, speaking of the restriction zones, I mean, that was the same time that they had introduced that kind of idea where, hey, like you got to fly a certain path, and if you want to dock with the spaceport, you have to call it in, and then you got to fly the path into the spaceport. And I mean, it's funny because, okay, this is kind of the real world. Like no one's going to take control of your ship and fly you around if you don't follow instructions. But this is kind of the real world. Like this is how it works. Like you have to call it in. You got to communicate with people. Like everyone knows there's a plane in the air when you're flying around. But I am glad that they removed it because it took away a little bit of the essence of Star Citizen of being able to fly around.
Yeah, to like
anywhere.
That first moment where you're like, I can go anywhere, and then you try to go somewhere, and they're like, well, can't go there actually. And I mean,
right.
To your point of realism, I think the government would be happy to take control of our spaceships /planes if they could, right? Like it's just the technology is not there. Yeah. So in a future world, I could totally see like particularly a government like Hurston, like, no. Your spaceship can't go over there. You know, I'm taking control. I'm crashing you into that building. What do I care?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I just, you know, you're talking about your story and how you got into the game. And it reminds me a lot of mine. And I mean, I'm sure we've had this discussion before, but, you know, I initially turned my eyes on the project when I was 13. So back in 2013. And I picked up a package then. It was like a Mustang. And I thought it was like, oh, look, I've got the premium Mustang ship. It's so cool. And my computer couldn't run the game. I was walking around the hangar. I couldn't do anything. And so I like forgot about my subscription for years until I sort of was in college. And I had a little bit of cash to play. You know, some people spend their, you know, first money or their first credit card on, you know, a trip to Italy or like, you know, a PlayStation or an Xbox. I bought virtual spaceships. That's where that was my financial mistake. But I'm still don't regret it, to be honest with you. But yeah, like,
oh yeah.
In that same vein of like, I didn't even really have a computer that could play the game, and I just wanted to play so bad. And you know, when I finally was in a position to even try or get a modicum of it, like this game, it was always calling my name.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, I remember when I was finally able to actually get into the game, because even when I had bought my first computer, I was still in this point of the game where the only thing I owned was, I think, I started with the Aurora, but at some point I went up to the Cutlass Black, and man, I had the Cutlass Black for like 2 years. That's what I used for everything. And I remember we did a bunch of multi-crew stuff in that all the time, because I think a lot of people were in the same boat as me. Everyone had one ship.
Yeah.
Some guys had like the Avenger Titan. Some people had, and I know someone had the Valkyrie. And so, you know, we were all multi-crewing in each other's ships, and that's kind of what our experience was. And then after a couple of years, a lot of us were like, well, I really want the Mercury Star Runner. And I'm going to get that. And then someone else is saying, well, I really want the Carrick, so I'm going to get that.
Yeah, it was.
And yeah.
That's so true. I mean, I think I came in right when this like balloon was happening, and I was kind of new to the org, and the reason I got into Exol was because Aton was just flying around in a Carrick, and I was like, hey, let me check that out. And we just got talking, and he brought me into the Discord. So like I was like, it's funny to think back on that because that was happening around that time, and I was just so unaware, right? Like because I hadn't like developed into the dynamics, but yeah, like there was. I think that's a story for a lot of backers, which is it wasn't like, okay, I'm putting $1,000 down on this game. It was like a slow creep, like a little bit of money here, a little bit of money here, making a big purchase, right? And then, years later, we're all whales, but that's not, we weren't that invested at the beginning, And we, yeah, it's cool to see that kind of stuff, and I know I am pleased with my purchases, and I'm glad to be able to like kind of play around, but it is funny to think like how much more we're kind of invested in the game now and how that plays into the picture. But we're not here to dwell on such things. We're here to talk about 4.1.1, which is coming out very soon. A lot of cool stuff, a lot of big missions and things. There's some ships coming in. What have you kind of heard about 4.1.1?
I mean, I know they're kind of emphasizing a lot of this stuff with new content, with new events. I've seen the stuff about they're going to do more missions centered around combat in general. They have the ambush mission that's coming out. There's some new patrol missions, and I think that'll be fun because it's a little bit more than just go here, blow this up.
Yeah.
And then move on. So, and I know they've kind of tried to do some of that stuff in the past. I remember back in, I don't remember updates. I remember years.
Yeah.
So I think back in 2019, they did a mission around Yella. And I just remember you'd go to this point, there'd be like 10, 15 ships. You'd go and attack them, blow them up. And then you'd have to go to another point. So I feel like they're trying to get back into that kind of mode where it's not just a one-off mission.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, as you say, a lot of the missions have been very bare bones for a long time. And even just a little bit of flavor, I think makes a big difference, right? Where it's like this, there's the vanilla version, and then there's the chocolate version, and here's like the strawberry version of basically doing the same thing, which is either that fetch quest or doing a bit of combat or a fight in that kind of regard. So I'm happy to see some color be brought into the world.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, because I mean it really is. I think that's how a lot of us have seen video games in general over the years, is everyone tends to make the same kinds of missions. And to be honest, it's like, hey, I mean, what else is there? It's not easy to be creative with these kinds of missions. So there's only so much you can do. But that's at the end of the day, that it really is what it is people are giving you ice cream, but they're giving you different flavors of ice cream. And it's kind of like, well, this flavor didn't really sit right, but this flavor is pretty good. So I can take this.
And I mean, to be fair, Star Citizen, one of the big draw points is the spaceship flight, which is master modes and that whole argument aside, is one of the most robust and interesting space combat systems. So of course, like, using missions that play off of like really robust features that you've already built, I mean, that it just makes sense, right? Like, instead of it reinventing the wheel, where it's like some people like cargo, some people don't, right? But most people will somewhat engage with either PvE or PvP content, right? Where are you going to like really risk putting a lot into some of these industrial loops in that way when, it's part of the reason why we see so much combat is because it's like, it's something that most people enjoy to some extent. And of course, right now it's so topical because it's Invictus launch week, which is a military holiday. So of course we're going to see some like combat come in here. Not that I don't want to see them expand the other PvE elements, but anything they do that, you know, adds a little bit more is good with me, right? Because we want to see a game where it's not like, okay, open Moby Glass, do the same mission over and over again, right? Whether or not the game loops themselves are the same, just kind of adding a little diversity there really adds a lot of depth and richness to the world.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Well, and they need to focus on everything needs to get its turn to get more polished up. And the reality is the driving force of a lot of the players. The thing that keeps a lot of them coming back to Star Citizen is things like the combat. And that's not to say that cargo hauling and mining aren't important. I mean, one of my favorite gameplay loops that they ever introduced was rock mining. Like, I love awesome. Going to the ground, mining with this little vehicle, and then loading it up in a space truck. Like, that's great. Yeah, but I don't disagree that the combat in general needs a lot more variety, because that is something like, if people enjoy the combat, they need variety, and there's only so much in the game right now as far as combat goes, and a lot of it feels like the same flavor of ice cream.
The thing about combat, and particularly, I mean, the genre is called FPS for a reason. First-person shooter. Not every FPS game is about shooting, but it's such a staple of the genre. And I think everyone's played an FPS to some extent, where there is like a combat element, right? I think, you know, I always talk about Overwatch, but, you know, the most popular role in Overwatch is and always will be DPS, because people want to just get into that fight, right? Like, support's fun, tank's fun, right? Creating space and, you know, doing all these things to kind of keep the team together, you know, playing quarterback. That's cool. But in most instances, people at least kind of like to, you know, just shoot something or, you know, watch a pretty light show in front of their face, right? I'm guilty of the same thing. I mean, that's part of the draw to Star Citizen. It's one of the best light shows out there, you know?
Right. You know, that would be an interesting statistic to find out. If you went into Star Citizen, you surveyed players, and you asked them, okay, what is the one thing you want to do when you are on a spaceship? Yeah. And like, I have no doubt a lot of them will say pilot or captain or something like that. But if you ask them their second choice, I have no doubt that they might want to say something like engineer, or, hey, I want to be the communications person. But most of them, the reality is most of them are like, no, I just want to sit in the turret and shoot stuff. Yeah. Like, that's entertaining. And I like, hey, I'm one of those people. Like, my second choice is probably going to be shooting spaceships. Like, it's fun. You can't deny it.
Undeniably satisfying, undeniably fun. There's pretty explosions. I mean, it's a good time all around. You know, and it is kind of we're kind of in a skewed point. I would love to see those statistics, but also we're talking about like engineering, which isn't in the game yet, right? The time I spent
that is so true.
You know, with the engineering playtest they did a while back, I had a lot of fun with just doing some engineering for a little bit. Would I do it long term? I don't know. I mean, it's just hard to say at this point. But I mean, I'm the kind of person that I want to engage with almost every game play loop there is, right? Whereas I know a lot of people are signing into this game because the dream is that there's a niche for everyone, right? Any space fantasy you want to live out is available. So it's one of those things where, you know, there's a lot of people like combat because it's the thing that's in, but also it probably is the thing that's in because a lot of people were asking for it, right? Or there was a lot of desire to do it, or it was something that devs wanted to get in first, right? It was important to them, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I mean, you know, I think that's the great thing about Star Citizen is, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we haven't seen yet, and that's exciting. You know, there's a lot of stuff we haven't seen yet. But with what there is in the game, it's all enjoyable, and there's a lot of different things to try out and kind of experience as far as that goes. And I know it's kind of a patience game, because I'm definitely I share the sentiment with both sides of the party where it's like, hey, why haven't they gone a lot farther with what they're doing? But at the same time, I also get it because, I mean, look at the game. Like, is there any other games that look like this that are at this big of a scale?
Yeah.
Very few, if any. Like, I would love to see a list in the comments of, hey, what games are on this scale that are out there. And I know that there's some, I'm sure a lot of people will quote EVE Online.
Yeah.
And like, I completely get that. Hey, like, I see what you're saying. But it's also about like, what are you trying to do with the game? Because sometimes I feel like Star Citizen, they kind of want to adapt what EVE Online has done. But they want to do it from a first person view.
Well, yeah, something that I think is more appealing to more people. EVE will always be a niche game because you are looking at a spaceship, you're idling in a lot of cases, even in fights, it's, orbit shoot, and this is more like hands-on. This is more, a lot more tactile, and people tend to respond better to that kind of thing. I mean, there's a reason why like a third-person perspective or a first-person perspective, when you look at the most popular games, usually they're in that kind of perspective, right? I mean, examples like League and Dota aside, for the majority of people, the popular games kind of fall in that sort of thing where it's like, can you escape into the character that's in front of you, that's interacting with a world that's so much larger than they are, right? And Star Citizen's doing that, I mean, better than any game I've seen so far, for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's also about like, what is the focus of the gameplay too? Because I mean, there's plenty of space games out there and a lot of them are fun. One that we've all played quite a bit is Space Engineers. Yeah. And I mean, it's a different niche because in that game, it's more about like build the spaceship you want, where I feel like Star Citizen plays much more into like the social aspect of the space universe. Because I think what draws a lot of people to this, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with like, what role are you going to choose? Is people want to play a role in the game and they want to play that role well. And, there's so many organizations in this game, like big organizations. Like people want that social experience. And there's plenty of room for lone wolves out there. Don't get me wrong. But if you want to be an engineer, I mean, I think you're going to have a lot more fun on something like an Idris or a Polaris or even a Cutlass Black.
Well, and I mean, it's such a human truth, which is, everyone wants like either job satisfaction or like satisfaction in their personal life. And a lot of that's tied up in other people, right? Like, maybe you're not the most popular engineer on the planet, but you do a damn good job and you do it for the people that, whose opinion you care about, right? And so, like, I think that's a big driving force. I mean, for us in our history with Star Citizen, and I think a lot of players out there where single player games always have a lifespan, right? Like, even the big ones, right? You look at their Twitch popularity, it drops off a cliff after a while because everyone's played it. They've gone through it. They've done that thing, right? It doesn't have any more to offer. The thing that a multiplayer game offers is like infinite possibilities because by the nature of having so many different perspectives, so many different people, it creates so many new scenarios and it creates way more replayability, right? So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of room for like a lone wolf, but I think even a lone wolf is going to want to have someone else either as an adversary or like a competitor in the thing that they like to do, or someone that they trade with, right? Even if for the most part they're alone, right? There's still like these relationships that are kind of key to that. Even if you're in the majority not seeing anyone else and just, zoning out, watching Netflix and doing your solo player thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because I mean, that's the thing is it's such a big universe. You could go a very long time without seeing anyone, but chances are if you play this game for even 2 hours, you're going to see someone. And it kind of just depends on what you're doing.
There's all these pinch points, right, where people naturally funnel and gather, right? Whether that's a station or a landing zone or stuff like that. It's a massive world and you could strike it out into the wilderness and not see anyone. But most of the time people are going from one popular location to another relatively popular location. Even the single player cargo guys, right, or at least running by someone, in the hallway who might be, stuffing a double dog down their face.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and I mean, like, hey, there's plenty of room for being a lone wolf, and I think probably something that gets to a lot of people is, it's that FOMO, fear of missing out. Like they want to participate in everything that the game has to offer, and some of them want to do it as a lone wolf. And frankly, it's not 100% possible. Like, it's not one of those games. This is very much a game that is a social game.
Yes.
The events are surrounded around groups of people. They don't intend the events in this game to be manned by one person.
Well, not that there's not.
It's kind of like that last event. Was it the not the recent stuff they've been? Well, a line of mine is going on right now, right? But yeah, I'm thinking of the one before 4.0. They had the
slicers operation.
Yeah, the slicers, and you had to take down an Idris. I mean, that wasn't one that could be easily done by a single person.
Yeah,
and I'm sure some people would be in their Corsairs and saying, "Hold my beer, let me do this."
But and they couldn't get away with it either, though, because like there's no escaping the fact that everyone wanted to fight the Idris, right? So like whether or not you went there solo, you're probably playing with a fleet. There's still someone near you, whether or not you're talking to them or not. They were there, right? Like, there was no way to, like, as you say, like, this game is meant to kind of mesh people, whether they want to or not. And I just think, like, a solo player, there's content for them. I mean, with this patch, we're seeing some of that too, or the new one, 4.1.1, currently in PTU. Some content that you can definitely do solo. But I just don't think you get as much legs. There's not as much endurance for that kind of experience. I think there's a cap, there's a limit, right? Where you're missing out on such a broader scope of things that can happen in this game, or the stories that can emerge, or the things you'll laugh about, while you're drinking around the bar,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, there is so much variety in the game. There's so much variety in what you can do and what you can experience. And I mean, like I said, I mean, there's space for everyone. You just kind of have to be willing to acknowledge the fact that, hey, if you're going to do it by yourself, you're not going to be able to do everything. And that's okay. Like,
it's cool. You should
even
still be able to
with a bunch of other people, you're not going to do everything. There's already too much in the game.
Yeah, the hope is that there's
to really do everything.
Hope is that there's corners for people to kind of fall into, right? Where if you like cargo and the patch isn't about cargo, well, this cargo's still there for you to do. Or if you like combat and they're kind of not paying attention to it, I mean, everything that they've built is still going to be a part of the game, which I think, kind of brings us to these 4.1 missions, right? Where some people have been complaining about the latest few months and that there's been maybe too much of a focus on combat, which I think is in some ways sort of a flawed perspective, because the Deditrine event, where you could either salvage or something, right, where it's like eliminate the slicers, right, once that whole story came to fruition, there was a lot of opportunity for industry players to interact with that game. And I mean, Aligner Mine has some of that, but it's still a combat mission, really. And then of course they're doing another combat patch now, but it's Invictus, so of course they are. So
right,
I mean, I'm fine with it, but I can see some people not being so pleased with this kind of focus, right? Where it's almost been a complaint constantly throughout the game's history of these, maybe too much combat in the game, right? Or it's like, no, the industry doesn't get the love it deserves.
Well, so here's my question. Is it that there's too much combat? Like, is there too much of a focus on combat, or is there too much of a focus on PvP?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when they introduced Pyro, this is pretty recent. When they introduced Pyro is all about PvP. There's nothing stopping anyone in Pyro from doing these highly illegal things.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want there. It's kind of your toxic player's paradise, because, hey, I can kill this player, steal his stuff, and guess what? There's no prison that's going to stop me. If someone comes and takes my bounty and kills me, well, too bad,
Yeah.
because there's no prison that I'm going to get sent to.
No big deal.
And so I definitely get that sentiment.
But there's
and
also...
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's also a way to engage with Pyro in a PvE, non-PvP way, where, you know, there's still like you can be out thinking the opponent, right? Like, okay, I'm going to keep my signature low while I do salvage. I'm going to stay away from the busy areas, right? I'm going to run cargo runs that maybe aren't the most popular, or I'm going to do a dog leg, right? Like jump to one place and then jump to another, so I'm coming from a different angle, right? Where I think that's facets to the game that only add interest to an industry loop, right? Even though maybe Pyro has this PvP focus, it's the PvP has the ramifications of increasing the interesting things that can happen in a PvE sense too, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you know, I mean, one of the first things that I did when I went to Pyro is I kept doing missions there's a place in Pyro. I don't remember which planet it is. I think it's Bloom. And there's a place there called Shepherd's Rest.
Yeah.
And I kept going there because they have all these combat missions there for Citizens for Prosperity. But that's the problem, is they have combat missions, a lot of them there, for everyone. So what do the PvPers do? What do my apologies if you're one of these people. What do the toxic players do? And I'm not saying everyone that goes there is a toxic player, but I'm just saying, if they want to be toxic, if someone wants PvP, where are they going to go? They're going to go there.
Yeah,
and that's what happened.
But it's not even like a combat only thing. Like Shepherd's Rest had a lot of cargo industry, like good prices on, I think it was gold. So like there was obviously, it became like a pinch point, right? But you're not going to know that, right? And so you might have a bad experience. You know, as much as I said, there's like it adds facets, that only comes with knowledge that you gained by having to interact with PvPers, right? So I could see that being like as like a problem for sure. Like where a PvEer might argue like that isn't what they're looking for, right? They don't want to have that situation come up because it's frustrating, right? Put all their money down on some gold or whatever and have it go bad. I mean, it's no fun, right? That's demotivating rather.
I mean, it's kind of the game that people paid for.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, this kind of thing was inevitable. Eventually there was going to be this kind of gameplay, and people don't like it, mostly because it's like, well, there's content here and I can't really enjoy the content. And I get that. And I feel that sometimes, but at the same time, they're catering to a different group of people. And maybe it is highlighting that there might be some good news for those people, where it's like, hey, I get that you can't enjoy this content, but hey, the PvP people have a place to go. So maybe that means there's less PvP people in Stanton. So I don't know.
That's what I was hoping with, like there was going to be a pressure valve that's released so that Stanton's a little safer. I think we're running into a big problem right now, which is hopefully 4.1.1 fixes this. But PvP bounties don't work. So people who are like trying to uphold the law or like take out these criminals, right? There's no consequences for someone who can, dodge the law anymore, because there's nobody who can chase them down. Because there's just that system is broken. It doesn't even work. It doesn't exist, which probably caused a lot of pain points with Aligner Mine. So it's one of those things that I hope they address, because, that PvP aspect is only good for PvEers, right? Like taking people off the board who would otherwise be griefing or pirating you, right? That's something that's good for them. And for me, when I'm engaging with that gameplay, right? For anyone who is. So there's something to be said for I hope they put an emphasis on fixing that. I haven't seen anything about it, but if they're going to focus on combat, that should be another thing they focus on.
Like adding more PvE preference? No.
Just getting the PvP bounty system working again, because it's been broken in the past few patches. Like if we're going to take another look at combat, that's a part of combat I'd like to see get some bug fixing and attention. Just to kind of help with that, right? To sort of bring us back to a norm where there's not just criminals everywhere. Anytime I go to mine or a line of mine, there's just someone sitting there being an asshole. I took down like 4 players the other day, and they looked like they were having a fun time. They're just hanging around and like shooting at the station and whatever. And I was like, oh, this looks fun. And then they started shooting me, and I was like, oh fuck. And so we got into it, and I killed them all, which I felt pretty good about, but. It was like there was no like if there had been a bounty system in place, like I would have gone there to fight them, or another PvP bounty hunter would have gone there to fight them, right? So there wouldn't be this super likelihood of there being like a nest of criminals there all the time. At least that helps a little bit with that, which might give some more Careberry types a chance to actually go in there and take part in the event without the trouble.
Yeah. Well, that is one interesting thing that kind of popped up with the liner mine is, I mean, this is a mission where people can presumably get a lot of loot from it, get a lot of resources, get a lot of money, whatever. And it's in a PvE central system, or at least more PvE preference than Pyro, a lot more.
Yeah.
But yet, everyone that goes and does the mission, instead of in the past when we saw a lot of people just getting together to do these missions, if you're in a group and you see another group, it's like, no, just shoot them. Don't even give them a chance.
It's a good point.
And I wonder, like, I'm a psychology major, and that makes me think, I wonder if something like Pyro being introduced kind of incentivized people to be a little bit more PvP minded.
You could be so
like
right about that.
View people now as a threat rather than, hey, there's a person here. Like, this is amazing.
Right. There's no, like, we're not seeing the conga lines of old, right, with Jump Town and that kind of thing, right? You might be totally on the money there. Like, there's like people have gotten a bit of a rust bug, right? Like, oh, maybe I do want to, maybe I can actually engage with this PvP. Right, where like the restrictions were taken off, the crime stat system wasn't available in Pyro, and now these people are coming back and they're like, I kind of like this PvP thing, So we may have lost something there. Well, we are looking at, this event is not very PvP centric. The one that we're getting up on is PvE, but it's combat. It's PvE combat. So there's a lot of different missions. There's some new ships coming, which are pretty cool. All of the missions look cool. There's the advanced training mission for new pilots and that kind of thing, which is like a series of ever escalating missions. And there's some voice lines to kind of give you some direction, maybe not enough direction, but still that's, it's a good step towards, a new player experience. There's like ambush missions where you go set up in a place and you wait. There's patrol missions where a series of random encounters can happen. So every patrol mission is just a little bit different. Something else pops up. You hear a new voice line, or, something new happens. And then kind of like the crowning jewel, or like the big event for this one, as far as we can tell, is this the Slicers are taking Polarises. They're stealing a Polaris and they're trying to escape into Pyro. So you have to chase down. They are. Yeah, of course they are. It's funny. There's like one voice line that the lady says where she's like, "You should want us to have this Polaris." Like, okay, sure, yeah. I want you to have that military asset that can cause mass genocide. Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, that makes
totally
sense.
Deserve. So
what's funny about that is, I don't know if you've seen this. I know there's kind of a mix of what's going on, but people will go around the universe and they'll just steal people's Polarises. Yeah. And some of them will even like kind of take their own Polarises and they'll put them up next to a station, and you just see a dozen people salvaging the Polarises. I was going to a random station in Pyro. I don't even remember why I was there, because it's out in the middle of nowhere. No one else is there. And I just see 4 or 5 Polarises sitting there. And I was like, whoa, is this like a group meet? And then right next to them, I see it was probably like 2 Reclaimers and then 3 or 4 Vultures just going to town on these Polarises. And I went up to them and I asked one of the guys, I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing here? Where'd you get all these Polarises from? And he says, oh, well, one of them's mine, but we stole the other 3.
So they had like a whole like Polaris-based salvage operation going on. Oh, this is legal salvage. They just like kept taking these people who potentially logged off or whatever. That's awesome. Oh,
when
man.
I say steal, because I feel like that's kind of a soft, that's kind of a hardcore way to put it.
Yeah.
What really happens is someone left their Polaris somewhere at like Shepherd's Rest, and they're like, well, it's mine now.
Yeah.
So they go and take the Polaris and they go fly off with it.
So you painted them as thieves, but really they're just being altruistic. They're cleaning up the server for the rest of us. Well,
you're not wrong.
Yeah, I think that's cool. So, I mean, there seems to be a big problem with people being unable to hold on to military ships. Maybe the slicers should just go to Shepherd's Rest and just pick up some random player's Polaris instead of going through the trouble of stealing it from the government, Yeah, at this point. But yeah, I mean, they look
like it's almost like they're following the storyline based off of what players are doing.
Yeah.
So like, well, everyone's taking each other's Polarises. So that's what the NPCs are going to do.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a suspension of disbelief with that kind of thing, right? Because it makes an interesting mission, so you kind of have to do it. Do you think, like, as an org, we're going to be engaging with this kind of stuff? Because I feel like we do a lot of combat at the end of the day. Like, we open the mission tab, and it's like, we get in someone's ship, and then we're like, let's go fight something, right? And we just do bounties or something like that. So could you see us kind of getting into this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think it's kind of unavoidable if you want to participate in the events. Like anyone that's an organization, if you want to participate in the events, the reality is that you're going to have to face some level of PvP. And this isn't really a new thing. I just think it's becoming more common because the stakes are slowly raising. Like there's actually things to earn and things to look forward to.
Yeah.
And when I say that there's things to look forward to, I mean, at least there's an incentive with these, special missions, with this whole thing with Wicklow's Emporium and all of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's definitely getting put in the game. But you know what I mean is there's just...
Well, see, here's an interesting one that so they're adding a new thing called scrip. Which is like a physicalized currency that you put in your backpack. And you can now trade scrip for Wicklow favors. So the same thing that you do to gather Karenite at the Aligner Mine event, you can actually, in this next patch, you'll be able to, just instead of that, go through PvE combat missions and gain the same thing. So they're creating a new path to achieve the same sort of thing, which I think is a great move because, there's a lot of people that just aren't. I mean, I think a lot of people didn't participate in a line of mine. I tried to, but it was broken most of the time. I got a couple good ones in. I ran it with. I was playing with Captain Burks's org, and we were going through it on a stream, and it was a lot of fun. But most of the time, the event isn't working. You're having to do a lot of server hopping, or you go there, and if you only have like 2 people, it's like, oh, okay, well, there's probably 4 people there. So having a new path, I think, is huge for that. This script stuff I think is going to be awesome. I mean, it's as you say, like the stakes are rising now, and there's new ways to achieve interesting things, and there's things to work for, right? Working for these ships, the combat zone started it, where you can work to get one of a few random ships, and you have to engage with PvP to do that. But it was something to work for beyond just watching your bank account go up, right? Something cool to do or cool to see or cool to talk about. Like, yeah, I got this ship from doing combat zones, and it was an arduous process, So, I mean, I like that direction for it, and that's why I'm pretty excited about 4.1.1 as far as that's concerned. Just sort of like a way I can passively, if I only have like 30 minutes a day, I could still work towards earning one of these bigger ships, right? I don't have to like commit to a big Aligner Mine organization gathering, herding all the cats thing, which is cool.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what they need at the end of the day is, I don't deny that these events, they definitely need to have a big incentive if people want to play them or if they want people to play them. So there needs to be a reason to go there. But I've always been of the stance that people shouldn't have to participate in a event or PvP in order to earn the same kind of currency, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that they need to be getting the same amount for working less, but they should still have the same opportunity. 100%. And I think that's that same thing in any game.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah, I mean that thought comes from Destiny, where they just had all these PvP things where, hey, if you want to earn this sick reward, then you have to do PvP and you have to be really good. It's like, oh man, sorry, I'm just not that good. And they always have people like, well, you just got to get with someone that's really good. It's like, well, I stink so bad that doesn't make
I'll
a
track him
difference.
down, ball and chain. Oh no, yeah. I mean, it's just good game design, really, right? Yeah, like it shouldn't be that you're getting the same turnout of rewards for putting in this, the safer path, right, where it's less risky. But there should be still a reward for someone who is taking the route of grinding, right? Who is like, that's something to be like applaud as well. Just as much as someone who's put the hours into training and being really good at PvP, someone who, is dedicated to the game and loves the game and plays a lot over time should also feel like they can play at that top level, or at least kind of hit those top level rewards, even if they don't want to be a PvPer or like,
Right.
go to these big events, or, maybe they want to play, so they don't want to gather with an org. Some people don't. I mean, it's finding friends online. Some people, I mean, there's a reason we're online. It's most of us are introverted, right? So,
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thought, because think of all of the events they've done so far. Yeah, some of them have had some elements that are not combat focused. Like Align or Mine has some elements, but at the end of the day, like Align or Mine, you need to have some decent combat skills. And I'm not saying you have to be good, but you need to be able to shoot your target, and you need to be able to hold your own, especially if other players are involved. So, at the end of the day, like I think they could really benefit from adding some events that are just forget combat for 2 minutes. Let's do some events that really cater to the people that love cargo hauling. Or how about these people that just love mining, and they would love some kind of event where it's like, who can mine the most?
Yeah.
Or, hey, let's get the community together. Hey, we're building a space station in this location, and we need this many resources.
Yeah.
Let's get all of our miners together to do that. And then, they can divide up the events in a way that caters to people. Like, they're always going to have some element of combat. So, hey, do an event where these guys have to mine a certain number of resources, and then someone else has to bury the cargo from one spot to another. Maybe you take the resources to a station, and then Idris comes in, picks it up, and it can be an NPC controlled Idris, but then everyone else in the server is guiding the Idris to that location.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Helldivers argument to some extent, where, watch that bar go up just a little bit, right? But you're contributing, right? And everyone's working at it, right? So, and I was thinking, like, this stuff we probably won't see until we see like base building and space station building, right? Where, like, okay, you're contributing to this grander goal for the org, but I think that should be something that we should bring to people who, don't want to engage with the org system too. An event at the level, the scale of, Big Idris shows up. But in that focus of cargo, right? Where not like, everyone's fighting over this cargo, but like, source this cargo yourself, right? Like Cargo Olympics is, that's a lore thing. That might be a good option, but like having these moments where you can just have people who are not fighting each other, they're working together, right? And there's nobody like, and those should be events where it's not like a draw for a PvPer, right? Like maybe those materials should be worthless to someone who's pirating, right? Who just is going to kill like a fat cow, right? Like there should be something that combat people cannot engage with, even though they can technically engage with it or be around. There should be like no incentive for them to engage with that event, because there should be something that's purely for these people, because everything has at least been partially for combat people. There should be something that's purely for people who just want to engage with the industry as well. Like I think that's only fair. Because
that's the hard thing is, how do you do that? Because there's always going to be, especially with how big the servers are now. I mean, there's 500 people in a server, and I don't know I can't tell anyone here what that means. Like, where are those 500 people? And like, can you get 500 people in one spot? I mean, I think you got to go to morphologists to see if that's possible. Right.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be at least one person that's trying to ruin somebody else's day. And like, sorry, that's just the way it is. I don't know that.
Yeah. Maybe
you can do anything about that.
Yeah. And that's true. I mean, a miner can kind of engage with the liner mine, like they'll be there, but you really do need a PvP group. So, I mean, it's not like there's not a mix to some extent, right? They're still dipping a toe in. And so like that could be, and this, even with piracy, actually, there's a lot of orgs who really like moving cargo because it gives new players who are learning the process something to do while the people who've put the hours into the PvP guard, right? Or, shoot down and gather the target. But, someone just wants to engage with that cargo loop, right? There's a spot for them in a primarily combat game loop. I hope that what we get to, and I really want to see this because this is where I really want to be, like a defender of the people, a police officer, a guard, security. Like there's, maybe there's people who are like trying to steal the cargo, but there's also like a really robust, like, defend the cargo runners, right? Where we're paying a lot of money to keep people off the back of these cargo runners, or like, extra money for people who are fighting criminals. That'd be, I think if we could add that level to it, so like the player base is monitoring itself to some extent, and that's sort of happening in the background, right? The main focus is the cargo, but in the background, there's maybe this, push and pull of good and evil. That would be cool, right? Like I think, I think combat players would love to engage with something like that. I know a lot of people who, spend most of their time in Arena Commander because, want to engage with piracy. They don't want to get with griefers. They want to fight skilled PvP players. And you're not finding a lot of those in PU. As I said, I'm not even very good. And I killed like 4 people. They all had combat ships. And I mean, like once you get to a certain level where you put the hours in, a lot of the player base just isn't at that level. Like the real PvPers, the really good players, they're in Arena Commander. So yeah. A reason to bring them over.
They're going to get the best stuff too. Yeah. I mean, how many people have their Hornet Mark II right now? Yeah. Like those are what the PvPers are using. Yeah. And not everyone can fork the money over for that.
Or don't want to. Like they'd rather have a whole C, right? Or would rather have a decent combat, a cargo ship. Or when they're earning money in game, they're not thinking about getting a combat ship. But someone who is like, I'm invested in that loop, can still interact with them, right? Because we're all going to put our resources in different places. So we always talk about this, and I think it's like such a through line here, but a bridge between all these players, reasons for them to interact or, work together, because some people are going to have everything, but not everyone is, right? And most people are not. Most people are going to stay in their lane or not play enough to have all the different facets together,
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned Helldivers too, and I think that's an interesting idea because I think it's where Cloud Imperium eventually wants to get. It's where the developers, the story writers, the executives, it's where they eventually want to get. But I feel like, and it kind of goes to what we're talking about, is yes, we want variety of combat. Absolutely. I don't want to be shooting the same 10 guys in the same bunker every single every single time, like I definitely want variety. Absolutely. But there is something to say about the direction of where the events take us, because kind of what we were talking about, there's a lot of emphasis on combat, and we haven't really done any events that don't involve some level of combat, right?
Yeah.
I think going along with that, we also talked about, like, there's a lot of people that play the game, and some people feel like, hey, this is just a tech demo. There's not really anything to work towards.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because we did get a comment on the last video that made me really think. This comment coming from Karmatic1745, who said, this was in response to the beginning of last week's episode where O'Neill said the reason he keeps coming back is because there's no other game that does Star Citizen. So his point was the question of what keeps you coming back, and the answer are quite dissatisfying to me. The experience on offer for Star Citizen is more akin to a tech demo than anything remotely close to a full game or experience. Everything is so buggy and half-baked. Most of the missions are boring as well, and the things that make decent money are dominated by people with crazy pledge ships who have been playing for years, which connects to a lot of what we're talking about here to some extent, right? Where, these are events that are dominated by people who are either combat savvy or play a lot or, put time into the game, right? We're not quite far away from, the JPEG simulator where people buy spaceships and they still constantly, particularly the Polaris, like a pay to win thing. So, some people say that, right? Where they think it's a tech demo, which I can totally understand that perspective at least.
Yeah. Well, and I don't, it's what I've said before. I can see both sides of the perspective. Is it a full game? Absolutely not. And we had this conversation before that I kind of see this game the same way I see something like Arma 3. People keep going back to Arma 3 because there's a lot of variety in it, and there's a lot of mods you can play. There are mods that are like life mods, and you can actually work towards something. But at the end of the day, the core of Arma is, you can play roles and things like that, but all these missions that you run, all these combat missions you run, like, why are you running them? Like, it doesn't get you any farther in the game. You're just working together with a group of people to do something. So there's a lot of variety in Arma, and I would even say there's more variety in Arma in terms of combat than there is in Star Citizen right now. And modders can do whatever the heck they want with Arma. But at the end of the day, it feels like there's a lot of similarities in the way that combat is played between Arma and Star Citizen. Star Citizen doesn't quite have the variety yet. Yeah. You don't see people going around in tanks. You don't see people like coordinating between tanks and air support and ground combat and all of that kind of thing. But you're not really working towards anything in Star Citizen. So I get that sentiment. Like, why are people playing it?
Why are we doing this? And I think this is kind of connects to a universal truth of reality, which is, two things can be true at once. The world is so complicated that can be the case. For me, I play Star Citizen almost daily, every week, and I enjoy the experience. And because of that, I would consider it a game. But you might see someone else who might not consider it a game, because what a game is philosophically probably varies from person to person at the end of the day. What does that actually mean? Like, what is a game is not a question that everyone's going to have the same answer to.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it always comes back to the idea of like, well, what are you doing? Like, what is your goal? That kind of thing. And you'll see the same thing in a lot of different games. There's a lot of games out there where, there's something to work towards, but a lot of them, it's also like, hey, like, you're really only here to get money, to buy more stuff to get more money.
Yeah.
So I get that sentiment. And I know a lot of people want RPG elements. They want some of the things that developers have talked about where, hey, the more you run, the better you get at running. The more you participate in combat missions, the more combat savvy your NPC is, the better your ship crew is, that kind of thing. I get that idea.
It's something, you talk about that, but like, at the end of the day, when we really consider that, all a game is a time waster. If we really like strip it down, and even life, there's not really a reason to live, but you make goals for yourself and you work towards things, and, providing players an option to do stuff, because nothing that they do in the game world is actually gonna have any implication on, your status in life or something like that. And that's part of the beauty, is that you can kind of escape into a world where it's not always the same, where, you can be someone who you aren't in real life, because obviously the sci-fi world doesn't exist. Right. So it's hard to argue that this game isn't a game just because it doesn't have a point, or any game is, because there's not really a point to anything. And some games it's more obvious than others. Like, as you say, Arma 3 or No Man's Sky is I think a good example of a game that's like, what am I doing this for? Right. Like, there's not really like something you're working for, but that's the
And
good.
it's the essence of the game that you
Yeah.
like.
Yeah,
Like you like participating in it and that kind of stuff.
it's
I
not
mean,
the
Arma
end
3,
goal.
you want to feel like a military
Yeah.
man. You want to feel like you're a special forces operative, and hey, that's cool.
It's
Like,
tons of fun. I mean, that's so true. It's just like you're not playing for the conclusion, you're playing for the journey. But to have the journey, you still need reasons to do it, which is why I'm a really big fan of the direction this year, and with Star Citizen 4.1.1 in particular, with this script thing being added, right? Because now there's like something more abstract to work towards, or something I want to put time into, right, to get to, right? A legitimate and concrete, loosely used digital concrete, right? Proof of the progress I've made, right? Which is just not something
yeah,
we've necessarily had in the game. Because, I mean, who cares how much money you've made, right? Like, you're not going to be able to brag about
yeah,
that to your org, and they'll be like, wow, that's amazing, right? It doesn't really mean anything to anyone besides yourself, right? So, but if you have like, this is the ship that I earned, right? I have a Polaris now, and it's got the Wicklow skin. That's cool, right? People are like, oh, this is dope, right? Like, you can see it, you can feel it, you can use it, which is
yeah.
way cooler, I think. And I think it's just a good direction for the game overall.
Yeah, and I think that they know where they're going, and a lot of people just have a hard time with, well, we just want it to be there, and
Yeah.
I get it. Like, it's, you want more to do in the game. You want a reason to play it. I know they've talked about how in the future you're gonna have different grades of weapons. You'll even be able to build those weapons, and like that's something to work towards. I think that's kind of the struggle with where you might see some people with, hey, there's a new currency, but you're spending it on the same thing. So probably what a lot of people are going to look for is, well, if we get a new currency, we want different things to spend it on. We also want new things that we can work towards and are going to be meaningful towards our gameplay experience. Because at the end of the day, that's what people want. And I get the sentiment about, well, so many people in Star Citizen already have the ships I want. So many people already own $10,000 worth of ships, and those same people that own those $10,000 worth of ships, it's like, well, why are you even playing the game at this point? Because you already own everything you can buy with money.
Yeah, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit when you get to a certain level. If you have everything you want, there's nothing to work towards, right? So there's that. It's hard to just be motivated to play for playing's sake. People want something or direction or something that they feel is a purpose for sure. I mean,
absolutely. And I've personally tried to be careful about, like, yes, I want to have cool ships to fly around, but I've been careful of what I put my money towards. And I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't need to spend any more money. If I want to get a certain ship, I'll just trade what I have for that. But you have to have some reason to play the game, especially when a lot of the incentive is in getting money to spend on equipment and ships. So, I don't own a Vulture. I probably won't ever buy one with, like, I'm not going to trade one of my ships now, but I will take the time in game to make money so that I can get one.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, and then there's the flip side where, reason I play every day, more or less, is because I'm at least training in Arena Commander to get better at combat. But that's an eye on an abstract goal too, where it's like, I want to fill a certain role within the org. I want to play certain types of gameplay, right? And so that dream is connected with improving my skill set. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons where you can find your own motivation, but not everyone can do that, right? A lot of people are more like, they want to see something, and I would never argue for less stuff in game, right? The more in-game incentives, the better for sure, and the more reasons outside of like, oh, just getting a ship or a unique item that you would play, I am always for.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because we see where the game's going to be, and there's going to be a lot of reasons to play, especially with, they're going to be adding base building. They're going to have different kinds of crafting in the game. You're actually going to be able to use resources. So to some extent, you won't even need money. Like, you'll actually be able to be self-sufficient to an extent. I don't know what they have planned as far as that will go. but there will be some kind of diversity there.
Yeah. This is,
I think there's something to be said about the short term though, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is the double-edged sword of Star Citizen. The reason we like playing is because we can keep our eyes on such things. Like, yeah, like I am super excited for base building and crafting and all these kind of connecting systems to come in. But, you know, it's also the patience wears thin when you know where we're going, right? It's harder to stay motivated. Like, as you say, like someone buys a ship for industry, or, you know, they want to do a specific gameplay loop, you know, Jumps being the guy who has passenger transport. He wants to do that. He's not seen it for years. And how long can you wait for something that's just always on the horizon but never comes? I mean, it's the duality, the push and pull of Star Citizen that really, you know, it can be tough at times. And, you know, it's like, I don't know what the right path is. I don't know how I would market this game, but there are definitely flaws with the way they do it, and there are definitely benefits.
Yeah, and kind of speaking to that sentiment, I think they should definitely prioritize wrapping up some of the gameplay loops and getting some in the game. The one with engineering has confused me because I'm surprised they haven't already added in
it sounded close.
more elements to it. And I hope that they do soon, because I know, like, and I'm not a gameplay developer. I can't speak to the right way to do it. But as a player, I would say, hey, even if it kind of stinks, I'd rather have it in sooner than later, just be so that people can learn it and have more variety of experience in the game. But that's also not to say that, hey, maybe it's not even in a point that it's workable yet.
And last question before we sign off for the day, because I totally agree. Cruise Lux or Cruise Dark?
Oh man, I've always been a Cruise Lux guy.
Hell yeah.
That's usually what I'm carrying around.
I knew I liked you for a reason. I think that's a great note to end on. Friendship reunited, because Cruise Lux is truly the best drink out there. For all the listeners out there, really thank you for tuning in. And once again, thank you so much for all the support we got on the last episode. If you want to see more episodes like this one, or have any suggestions, or want to leave a comment on the video that you'd like us to talk about next time, please feel free to do so. And always like, subscribe, and tune into the show next week. Hopefully we'll see you there. Peace out.